we have today is a very corrupt institution, and two, because the rest of the public service and even the private sector becomes complacent because they think the EACC is too far away to notice what they are doing.
All right, and before we move on to another story that really sets the stage for us in terms of where we have come from, Harrison, clearly it takes more than just one particular body to effectively fight corruption, because we are talking about the EACC. You're saying the president does not appear to be doing much, but it doesn't take one to finally see the big fish fried, does it?
No, it takes everybody. The churches are supposed actually to take part in the fight against corruption under the EACC Act. The religious bodies actually are supposed to be participatory. The Law Society is supposed to second actually someone in the advisory board, and the business community is supposed to do it. But what are we seeing? These are people who have taken a backseat and almost resigned themselves. This resignation, in turn, has created this environment where we deify, we elevate our politicians because they are in charge, as it were, of our economic resources. And because of that, then, we place them on that high pedestal and woe betide any person who tries to show and demonstrate that that person you're elevating up there is actually corrupt. Look at Waiguru Fraser, with all due respect to her. When allegations were made in the first instance, the 791 million could not be accounted for. 791 million. I'm talking about shillings. Everybody just 791 has not yet registered in their minds. And so at that basic level, we, the Kenyan people, have not internalized this ideal of a society where we live that I abhor, I actually hate corruption.
All right.
So you find that the different institutions that are supposed to come together, help us fight corruption, they are right there deifying these politicians who are actually siphoning off from our public offers the money that is supposed to be actually building us in our society. And then what happens to the entire system of fighting this corruption? You find this person who is actually pointed at, you're a thief, with this euphemism, corrupt.
Okay.
What happens to them? They go to court.
Yes.
They want to be laundered.
All right, and we will continue with this conversation. I'll come to you shortly in Dubi, but I want us to go back because EACC is what we want to focus on, the body that's mandated to spearhead this conversation. Of course, there are other organizations and institutions that are supposed to help with this particular work, but our Rita Tinina prepared a report a while back that really captured the journey that Kenya has taken in as far as fighting corruption is concerned, way back to where we had a police unit that was mandated with that mandate to CASA, to CAS as well, and now we have the EACC. Let's take a look at that and we'll continue with our discussion here in studio.
This building remains famous for the great soundbites that have come from here.
We think none harm, do none harm, wish none harm. We only attack corruption, and if corruption has a residence in your person, we must deal with you because you accommodate corruption.
The director liveth between the hammer of his friends and the anvil of his opponents.
But Kenya's war on graft has been dogged by intrigues right from the beginning. It started with this man, John Haron Mwau, who in December 1997 was appointed the first director of the then newly created Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority. But the ex-policeman would soon run into trouble when he sought to prosecute 4 top treasury and tax officials over an alleged fraud on non-collection of taxes relating to wheat and sugar imports. A tribunal was quickly put together to prosecute Mwau, and in November of 1998, he resigned, sending Kenya's anti-corruption war on a spiral. It turned out that Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority had been given powers to prosecute without an amendment to the Constitution that at the time confined such powers to the office of the Attorney General.
Banauriri, who gave you authority to write these things to me? Have you read the Prevention of Corruption Act? Have you read?
Justice Aaron Ringera, who as Solicitor General had been a witness at the Mwao Tribunal, was later appointed as the new director of CASA in March of 1999. But on December 22, 2000, the courts finally dealt CASA a death blow, declaring it unconstitutional. With pressure mounting on the KANU government from both the IMF and the World Bank, the government appointed an anti-corruption police unit headed by a former deputy director of CASA, Swale Slim, to take over all the 139 cases that were being investigated by the authority. But the unit's mandate remained unclear and its independence was questioned by critics. A ray of hope came in 2003 when, in the early days of the NAC administration, the Kenya Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act was passed, putting in place the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, KACC. And once again, Aaron Ringera was given the job of reviving Kenya's faltering war on graft. Ringera would become famous for his Shakespeare quotes and promises of fire and brimstone for the corrupt. But he had to bow out on the 30th of September 2009 when Parliament refused to endorse his reappointment on claims that his fishing expeditions had come to naught.
And for those who perennially complain that cars only deals with the small fish, let me ask you to reflect on this.
He declared that the war on corruption would never succeed until the commission was given powers to prosecute, to seize assets and passports, and require public officials to declare wealth whenever it deemed fit. But the commission was in for more drama. Next on stage, Professor Patrick Loch Otieno Lumumba.
In the next 2 to 3 weeks, we expect that about between 5 and 10 high-voltage files, 5 to 8 high-voltage files.
PLO would hit the ground running, even joining street demonstrations on occasion. But his Waterloo would come in the middle of 2010, when he declared that he was training his guns on top officials and members of parliament.
Fight against corruption will be conducted without fear, favor, or ill will, for the sake of this country and for the sake of this generation and generations yet to be born.
That would pave way for a fresh controversy over the appointment of Mumo Matemu as the chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The latest intrigues bear the hallmarks of an all-too-familiar pattern. But with the talk of corruption in every major public institution, the big question now is whether Mumo Matemu's commission will still have the energy to lead the fight. Rita Chinina, KTN, Nairobi.
Rita, they're painting for us a picture of what the war against corruption has looked like in terms of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Of course, has had different names in the past and institutions charged with that mandate. We want to take a short break, but when we return, we'll look at the commission as it currently stands. Who are these men and women in the commission? And of course, what happened since Matemu-led commission, which is no longer now in place, was put in. And of course, to continue with my guests to give their insights on this particular subject. Stay with the last word here on KTN News. All right, good evening and welcome back to The Last Word. I'm Sophia Wanuna. Now, before we went on break, Richard Nina broke for us down just what exactly happened in as far as the bodies mandated with spearheading the fight against corruption, starting there with the KACA, Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority, moving on to a police unit that was to do that work, then to the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission. Of course, now we have the EACC. And before these commissioners, the current ones that are in office were sworn in January. Of course, there was the commission that was led by Mumo Matemu, and that living under acrimonious situations following a petition. But let's look at who is in office right now in this commission. The chairman, Philip Kinusu, is coming from the private sector as a former chairman of consultancy firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. And we also have in that particular EACC now, Dabar Malim Abdi, and he has been sitting on the Transition Authority, a body formed to help transfer functions and assets from the national government to counties and their devolved system. Moving on now to the next Commissioner is Paul Moneki Gashoke. He's the founder and managing partner of a law firm. He's also a litigation advocate and conveyancer. He was chairman of the Public Procurement Complaints Review and Appeals Board from 17th of September 2007 to 2013. Then there's Sophia Lepucherit. She claims to be the first woman from the expansive Samburu County to ever join the university, where she studied public administration. And Sophia Lepchirit has worked for the Industrial and Commercial Development Corporation and previously served in a number of executive leadership positions in the Public Service Commission and the Central Bank of Kenya. So those right there, the commissioners. We have one more, Rose Mtambo Masharia. Now was a member of the Commission of the Implementation of the Constitution, CIC, which of course called it a day last year. She also sits on the Kenya ICT board. She previously worked for the Nyayo T-Zones Development Corporation for the Higher Education Loans Board. So those, the men and the women, are the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission now. And of course, what's very clear, a diverse bringing together of individuals in that commission, diverse backgrounds, I beg your pardon there. And so that is one of the things the chairman, whilst he was being sworn in, said that served as a strength to allow for them to bring in that expertise and serve this commission going forward. And that's the discussion I want to continue with my guests in studio this evening. Gentlemen, just looking at that report by Rita, clearly breaking it down for us, just what exactly has happened and has been the fate of previous commissioners and commissions. Are we looking at the same script, different cast for the now Philip Kinusu-led commission?
May I first say this? What I'd hoped to say before we went to the break was this, that we have institutionalized corruption, and we have focused too much on the formalistic nature of fighting corruption rather than having a value-based system. When Kenyans went to vote for a new constitution, when we enacted the 2010 constitution, right, recognizing that our society was bereft of common ground on morals and values of society, we actually enacted into the constitution important values in the Bill of Rights, in Article 10 of the Constitution, and in Chapter 6, which talks about the values of public governance. But since then, we seem to have forgotten and gone into the formalistic mode where we are addressing our social and legal issues through the conveyor belt process rather than asking what are the values we want to entrench into our society, into our law, and into our value system to encourage people to live by those values. That said, so that when my friend talks about religious bodies, law societies, and other societies being stakeholders in electing or appointing those who are guardians of the anti-corruption effort, we do so forgetting that the law society, if I may give an example to jog our memory, when Karura Forest was once being grabbed, and I'm not going to be discussing the individual lawyers involved, but there were lawyers who were involved in the transactions.
All right, and I want to take us back.
And the same happens today.
Yes.
If you look at the so much money about NYS stolen, there are lawyers involved.
All right, let's go back to the institution, because I want us to focus on the EACC now and these particular commissioners in office, whether they are likely to face the same fate. Because there are those who have claimed, let me take it to him briefly, and then come back to you. There are those who have claimed perhaps they need more powers to be able to prosecute. There are those who said maybe they need more money. What do you think?
The common thread that weaves around what we have seen in our clip is very disturbing. The common thread is attack and shoot the organization itself. Declare it unconstitutional, clip its wings, and as far as possible make sure that it is just a redundant, useless body. It just maintains a facade of this EACC. In other words, it's never going to have the power to send anyone to jail. That seems to be the common thread. Mao was being shot at, and PLO was being shot at. Muma Matemu was also shot at, and the lady Kano and the other commissioners.
Onsongo.
Onsongo, yes.
They were driven off. And now these commissioners who came, and I pity Kinisu, Kinisu, you better be careful. And I'm just telling you, you better read that history very carefully.
They're coming for you.
And they're coming for you. They're coming for you. Now, why do I say that? Because you can see the history